Hi, dreamers. As I was thinking about what to talk about this week, I thought, how come I've never done a video on DIVO? And if you've followed me for a while on Twitter, you know that I refer to DIVO as my boyfriend. So today I'm going to show you why I have over $140,000 invested in DIVO, and why I've started a new position in QDVO, and how the Amplify ETFs differ from all the other derivative ETFs, and also why I consider it an alternative to SCHD. So let's talk about it. So the first thing I wanted to point out in my Seeking Alpha account is that DIVO is up a full 19% this year. And one of the reasons for that is that dividend stocks do better in a declining interest rate environment. And so I'm expecting DIVO to do quite well over the next few years as those interest rates decline. And so if you go to the Amplify ETF page, you can start to find information about the fact that DIVO has been around for a very long time, since 2016, and in fact is one of the oldest derivative ETFs. You can see the net assets here under management, and they do have an expense ratio that's a little bit higher due to their hands-on and very strategic approach. You can see that the fund is 5-star Morningstar rated, it pays out monthly, and the current distribution rate is 4.77. Now if we scroll down to see what the holdings are, and we actually click on View All Holding, you'll see the holdings listed here: Caterpillar, Home Depot, Visa, UNH, Apple, Goldman Sachs, and basically big blue chip names that you would expect. And so the strategy behind DIVO is this: that they're offering monthly income while providing high risk-adjusted returns, such that you get approximately 2 to 3% from dividend income and 2 to 4% from options premiums. And so your income comes from two places: the dividend-paying stocks and opportunistically writing covered calls on the stocks within the holdings. Another main reason to hold DIVO in your mix is that the dividend plus option income provides a lower volatility, especially during flat or down times. But you still might be thinking, Dream, $140,000 against DIVO is kind of a lot of money. So let me show you a couple of other reasons why I consider DIVO my steady boyfriend. If you click on this Download Holdings as a CSV file, you'll get the details behind exactly how many shares and the weightings. But another thing you'll get is exactly which stocks they're writing covered calls on at the moment. And so for example, you'll see 2,000 shares of Apple has a call of $250 on November 1st, 2024. And here's another one. 1,000 shares of IBM has a call of $255, also with an expiration of November 1. And so one of the things that people say all the time is, well, if I'm going to write covered calls, I might as well do it myself. But the reality is that you probably don't have enough of a portfolio to be working with this level of shares. 2,000 shares, 1,000 shares, 5,000 shares of Merck, 5,000 shares of Visa. And so the bottom line is, because of the size of their portfolio, they're able to generate a significant amount of premium across the number of shares that they have that probably you and I could not. Another thing I wanted to point out on the main page is that you can actually see their monthly commentary. And if you click on this, it'll actually take you to an Insights page where you can read about what the commentary was during September 2024. And so for example, you can see here, one new holding was added to the fund in September, Meta, because Meta initiated a dividend earlier this year, making them an eligible candidate. And so because the company checks most of the same boxes as the other positions, a reasonable valuation, strong business model, a strong free cash flow, as well as growing margins, they decided to add it to the fund. They also added American Express and IBM. And then they talk about other holdings like TJX, which was partially called away and then repurchased. And so it's interesting because in the commentary, you can see how they're continually managing, changing the weighting, and strategically taking advantage of changes in the marketplace. And so essentially, one of the things that you are paying for is the DIVO selection methodology, where they're constantly screening for high-quality, large-cap companies with a historical dividend and earnings growth. They're looking within different sectors that are over or underweight, keeping the selection within DIVO tight as they continually screen and adjust according to market cap, management track record, earnings, cash flow, and return on equity. And then this is my favorite part: tactically covered call writing on individual stocks, not based on an index approach which is essentially what's happening on some of the other big derivative ETFs that I've covered. And the last thing they talk about here is that at the end of the month, approximately 11% of the portfolio was covered. And so you can see about 90% was left open for capital gains. And so I don't know about you guys, but I do my best to monitor and do research on all the factors. But the idea of outsourcing a percentage of my portfolio to someone else who's doing this as well is very attractive to me. And so if I go back to my Seeking Alpha tool, I can see how all of that activity in screening and covered call writing has performed over the last 3 years. And so you can see DIVO having a total return of 32%, which is just a little bit better than the S&P 500 of 30%, and quite a bit better than the JEPI return of about 28%. And so let's add SCHD, which you might consider an alternative to DIVO. So if I go to select symbols and add SCHD, we can see how this has performed. And there you have it. SCHD over the last 3 years at about 25% return, which of course is not a derivative ETF. But if you're looking to create a comparative set of relatively stable, low volatility, more traditional dividend-based ETFs, SCHD versus JEPI versus DIVO is an interesting comparison. And as you know, I don't have any SCHD and really use DIVO as the alternative. And so you can imagine how excited I was when I saw a brand new product from Amplify, QDVO. And essentially QDVO is just like DIVO, but more focused on tech and high growth stocks. And so if we take a look at QDVO, you can see that it was just launched in August of 2024. It's just at the beginning of growing its assets under management and has the same expense ratio as DIVO. You see here it also pays monthly, but has a little bit of a higher yield at 7%. And then if we continue to scroll down, you can see the fund holdings here, much more tech focused, and therefore volatility is going to be much higher than DIVO. You've got Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, Alphabet, Broadcom, etc. And if we click on all holdings, you can start to see all of them here. One thing I like about QDVO is that it's not all technology holdings, but rather high growth, which you can see in Home Depot, T-Mobile, Lilly, etc. And then just like DIVO, if we click to see the holdings as a CVS file, you're going to get the monthly detail on the covered calls. And so if we scroll down here, you're going to see the exact covered calls. For example, 10 on Apple at a strike of 237.5, 10 on Amazon at a strike of 192.5, and 13 on Palantir at a call of 44.5. One of the other things I think is interesting about looking at this detail is that it might inform some of your own thinking on which tickers and what call strikes the pros are making and how that compares to what your strategy is in your own portfolio. So that's another way to look at this. And so with QDVO, the reason for it is getting the benefit from seeking capital appreciation from these high growth stocks, plus the monthly income from the options premiums. And then, of course, to a lesser extent, the dividends. And so if we go back to the Seeking Alpha tool, we can add QDVO to the mix. But as you can see, it's very new with only a couple of months of return. And since QDVO is more high growth oriented, perhaps a better comparison for QDVO might be something like JEPQ. So if we add JEPQ to the mix, just for comparison, you can see the relative return of QDVO at 3.87% to JEPQ's 2.87%, SCHD 2.39%, and then the rest of the comparison set here. And so with limited time since it just launched, it really hasn't been out long enough to draw any major conclusions. But since I really like the longevity and the general strategy of DIVO, I have high hopes for QDVO and almost have $20,000 in it already. So now hopefully you have a little bit better understanding of why I always call DIVO my steady boyfriend and why I'm adding QDVO to the mix. I just love the curated, strategic, pinpointed approach of these two funds in particular. Do you have DIVO or QDVO? Let me know what you think in the comments. Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this dividend income update. And if you want a richer, real-time experience with me, you can always follow me on Instagram or X. And if you're doing your own research using Seeking Alpha, feel free to find the link below to subscribe if you want, no pressure. As always, I encourage you to do your own research, then implement and learn by putting it into practice. And as a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor, so keep in mind these videos are for entertainment and inspiration only. I'll see you on the flip side.